Heroes wore armor and sword in sunny lands and made their way through rainforests under the rain. He dreamed of becoming a traveler and lived desperately by this path. But after 40 years, he gained baggage. The rain did not stop, and the man raised his hand to his face, bearing the burden of a weak body and an exhausted heart. He raised the sword that reflected the light. Despite everything, he continued trying to be an adventurer. And one day, something happened. The man was thrown into the air, his face was in pain, and his belongings, bags, backpack, sleeping bags scattered in all directions because he was hit by a dragon. It was a quiet day. Numerous clouds floated in the sky. A village was visible near the fir trees, and mountains appeared on the distant horizon. The shadow of the neighboring tree fell on the closed window, and a small bird was sitting on the branch and chirping. Someone turned the door handle, and bright light flew into the room through the crack. The dark-haired young man rubbed his eyes and squinted from the dazzling sun. The boy and his sister's mother were about to leave, but she promised to return soon and asked the main character to take care of Lila. The little girl was scared and clung to her brother, pulling at the edge of his shirt. But the boy named Arito said goodbye with a smile and wished his mother a good day. 5 years have passed since he was born in this village. He and his sister, who was still holding him, went to another room. The boy was sitting on the bed, and the girl asked her brother to read her a book. There were 4 in the family: him, his father and mother, and the younger sister Lila. The young man opened the book. His attention was drawn to the illustration of the knight. He ran his fingers over the drawing. The girl sat nearby and rubbed her eye, looking at the book with surprise. She asked the boy who it was, but he did not answer. He carefully examined the armor and the knight's sword. It was his dream for the future. Arito's eyes clouded. He nodded and thought he knew his dream, but something began to change. The boy suddenly grew up, and there was neither a room nor sister Lila. There was only emptiness. He sat alone, cross-legged with his head down. The tired gaze said nothing. The man looked into the distance, his fingers trembling slightly. The hero gradually came to his senses. Thoughts spun in his head about where he was and what was happening. The luggage was with him, so he could not understand if this was a real shock before death. The man raised his head. Horror appeared on his face, and he realized that a dragon was in front of him. A giant creature with powerful wings, horns, and long claws sat opposite and calmly looked down, squinting slightly. He instinctively reached for the sword, but there was nothing nearby. The hero turned around confused and realized he had no weapon. The dragon stood motionless as if waiting for something. The young man felt hopeless and understood that this was the end, because this dragon had recently taken his life. Memories of the horrors of that day flashed through his mind. He shuddered. He boldly looked at the dragon, thinking that it had decided to eat his soul. The hero silently looked at the monster as if asking a question, and the monster looked a little puzzled. Suddenly the dragon spoke. She apologized and regretfully admitted that she had not noticed the man while communicating with the spirits of the wind. The previous night was very surprising. The little dragon completely lost hope and said that she did not regret those who challenged her, and that everything happened because of her recklessness. She wanted to pass part of her power to him, and asked him to start a new life. The magical creature caught his gaze and said that she was a sacred dragon, filling his soul with light. It seemed that the boy was thrown back by an invisible force. He disappeared, and a lonely leaf hung against the backdrop of a gloomy sky. The boy's body rushed into the distance so fast that he could not even be noticed. Only the grass swayed in the wind. The fair-haired knight lay alone in the meadow. Next to him were a sword, a shield, and a bag. He laid his head on his hands and thought that 40 years had passed since then. After reincarnation, he was given the attribute of light, while the attribute of fire, which he had before, remained, and a new attribute of wind appeared. The young man thought that having 3 traits was quite rare. The more attributes he had, the more types of weapons and items suited him, and he could become stronger than his status. He raised the sword above his head to shade the sun. The shadow of the sword fell on his face. He looked at it sadly and suddenly jumped up. He looked at the valley and the leaves swirling in the wind, and thought that he still did not make it in time. The knight did not doubt that this time he would be able to make a name for himself as an adventurer. He had great hopes for the future, but achieved nothing and spent 40 years without a home. And when he thought about it, it was already too late. He stood up, leaning on his numb legs with his hand. The man gathered his things and set off, leaving only the mountains behind. He thought the city was still far away, and it was worth finding a place to spend the night, when a bird flying very close at incredible speed caught his attention. A whole flock was flying after the bird, which greatly frightened the traveler. He could not understand what it was, and froze looking around. At that moment, a huge dragon was flying from the sky, cutting through the air straight at him. The man could not believe what was happening, and did not move from his place. Horror and the reflection of that very dragon froze in his eyes. The knight opened one eye, trying to understand what was happening and where he had ended up. Around him there was nothing again. He hovered in the air, confused, with crossed legs. There was no pain from the collision, instead a familiar feeling appeared, because he had already been here before. He looked around and searched for something that would catch his eye. Suddenly, a dragon appeared right in front of him. It lay opposite and seemed not to notice the man, looking somewhere aside. The traveler realized that this was the very dragon that had just knocked him off his feet. He did not know what to do and looked at the dragon, waiting for an answer. The dragoness cried bitterly, wiped her tears with a claw, and confessed that she was very sorry, because she could not even imagine that a man could be in such a desert, while the knight stood with its head raised and watched this discovery in shock. He was surprised that such a huge dragon had a female voice, and meanwhile she replied that if he were her enemy, he should not expect forgiveness. But it was her fault, because she got too carried away during the flight. She asked for forgiveness, and knowing that it would not be enough, gave him part of her power. The traveler looked exhausted when he heard that he would have to be born again. The dark dragon added darkness to his soul, and the man silently watched. The dragon flapped its wings and rose above the ground. The knight still hovered in the air. You wondered if a person had ever been born with all 5 traits at once. After the reincarnation, as promised, he was given the power of darkness, and also the power of water appeared. The young man retained 3 qualities from previous lives, and as a result there were 5. People around looked at the young man with admiration, rejoiced in his skills, and their expectations constantly grew. After all, it was the birth of a genius comparable to heroes of all times. The young man was not interested in girls and devoted all his time to training. He looked at his sword and thought that he could not be a hero, even though he had 5 attributes and tried so hard. So the knight was confident that this time everything would definitely succeed. But he was again in the same place alone with the dragon. Emotions began to control him, and it seemed to him that it was too much. The hero thought that twice could be a coincidence, but nothing else should be expected, because he found himself in such a situation again. The traveler's patience ran out, and he no longer had decent words, so he began to swear. The dragon silently watched the main hero. The dragoness wiped her face with her paw and decided that being knocked down by a dragon is rare, but 3 times could already be a curse. She also apologized for being inattentive during the flight. The knight only thought that he finally found a dragon with a real voice. She, like the previous ones, promised to give him part of her power. This time they wished him a happy life. The hero clenched his fists. The chaos dragon appeared before him. Being one of the wings of the 3 divine dragons, she endowed his soul with chaos. Saying the words, she slowly began to evaporate. The man watched this strangely. He too was becoming faceless, as if dissolving into space. But now he had all the signs. So Arito had at his disposal 4 main characteristics. From the first 2 dragons, he received the attribute of light, which occurs in only 1 out of 100,000 people, and the attribute of darkness possessed by only a few half-humans. And the last dragon gave him the attribute of chaos, which is inherent only to monsters and objects. This attribute cannot manifest in humans and half-humans. These properties were like silk, and having all of them, he would gain power comparable to a god. Arito, who was sitting on the bed, suddenly said that he did not think it was really so, and Lila, who was nearby, frightened by her brother's reaction, jumped up and looked at him with her mouth open. She silently waited for her brother to explain himself and just watched. The boy threw back his head and sighed, because after 3 lives he realized that he had very low basic abilities and limited growth potential. Such things are decided at the soul level. While the young man was lamenting past failures, his sister had already recovered from the unexpected scream and was gradually falling asleep. Arito was looking at the night illustration in the book, and even if everything was predetermined, it did not mean that he was going to give up the dream of becoming an adventurer. He bared his teeth and furrowed his brows in anger, knowing he would not allow this to happen again. The boy imagined himself in a row with all his past lives, and in each he wanted to be a traveler. Even if he is cursed and destined to die by a dragon, he still wants to become an adventurer and succeed. But the previous night knew that reality is ruthless, and he clearly lacked talent. He looked gloomily at his hands and did not know what to do now. The boy clenched his fists tightly. Arito suddenly jumped out of bed and loudly said that he would become a master of item enhancement, which scared his sister again. But the brother did not pay any attention to her at all. He was looking into the distance and understood that he was weak himself. He said that he would fill the void with items, and little Lily still did not understand anything, looking at her brother and rubbing her eyes with a confused expression. But if he used only strong weapons, he could die like the last 2, for example, a fire sword that increases power, and a water armor that regenerates itself. The boy was so absorbed in himself that he noticed nothing around. He was scrolling through some panel and remembered that there was also wind, earth, light, and darkness. He had all the attributes, including the last attribute of chaos, rare, which opens completely new possibilities. Arito was lost in thought, and his sister was almost asleep. The young man decided to hone his last ability. It was not only about becoming stronger. He aspired to create what only he could make, his own armor, weapons, and other things. Night hung over the broken sword. This time he would use his strengths and become an adventurer. His face was serious, and his eyes were full of determination. Little Arito stood in the middle of the room with a smile, looking dreamily into the distance, and hoping that girls liked adventurers. Lila did not hear her brother and was already asleep. 2 dragons hovered in the sky and froze in the air, looking straight at each other. One of them sharply descended and let out a loud roar. Then he spread his wings. Large paws with long claws almost touched the ground. It was a dark dragon preparing to land after a flight. The other dragons reacted when he appeared. Someone nodded, squinting slightly. The second light dragon silently watched the newcomer. The one who was late apologized for not arriving on time and asked how long they had to wait. They assured that they had arrived here very recently. The lightest dragoness placed her paw on her face and recalled that it was about 6 months ago. The dragon started a friendly conversation. They were waiting for the third. One was sleeping the whole time. The dark dragon was happy and said that the lightest dragon had lost weight, and the saint was amused by such a comment. The second dragoness got down to business and said she had gathered them to find out if they had ever had to kill a human and then resurrect them. Both dragons recalled a young man they had accidentally knocked down. The saint said that if she remembered correctly, it was about 80 years ago. Later she endowed that man with her attribute. Darkness plunged into memories and recalled that 40 years had passed since she met the knight, and that she had also endowed him with her trait. The third dragoness told the others that the same thing had recently happened to her, and she had endowed a human with the trait of chaos. All 3 sat facing each other in silence, pondering what they had heard. Sveta was not sure if this was the same person, or just a coincidence. The chaos dragon nodded, and the third dark dragon did not believe it and thought it was a joke, and she wondered why she was so unlucky. Kea said she suspected that the young man was cursed, but most likely it was not so. Out of curiosity, she looked into his soul, and it turned out that even before reincarnation, he already had problems. Darkness and Saint looked anxiously at the Chaos Dragon. They did not understand what problems she was talking about. The third dragoness lowered her head, her eyes filled with sadness and compassion. She told him that the man was given low characteristics on a spiritual level and extremely low potential for growth. Therefore, Chaos decided that all 3 of his lives were almost indistinguishable from each other. Her companions could not utter a word. They were very surprised by what they heard. Sveta considered this a terrible situation and thought that it was enough to give him a trait of light, and the Chaos Dragon said that she had done the same. She was sure that the gathered people were to blame for taking away the nightlife and forcing him to live 2 more unhappy lives. The saint replied that they did not know if it was true. Chaos agreed, but also realized that on the other hand that boy had all 7 traits. He could become arrogant, and then the chance of an early death would increase. Sveta frowned and was determined. She said that, being connected with God, they could not leave such outrage unanswered. The Dark Dragoness said that it was all correct, but she did not understand what they should do, because in all their lives they could only give someone 1 gift. She still thought that technically it was 1 life, but since the boy was reborn and considered the beginning of a new one, she did not know what she could now reward this man with. In the end, she knew that Chaos had already passed her property to the young man. Sveta said that for now they could not give anything to the boy, and in general chaos was a property that people should not have. It had many advantages, and she thought that was enough. Darkness wanted to know what to do now. The Dragoness of Light replied that she would think about it. The boy was just born, so she suggested waiting until he grows up. The Dark Dragoness looked worried. She needed to consider whether their indicators were too high. They would have to transform into a human, but if dragons did this, they would not be able to regain their properties for some time. Darkness and the Saint discussed that after a long break they wanted to visit a human city because it was fun. The chaotic dragons silently observed their conversation from the side. Chaos was completely depressed because the dragons forgot about her, and she began to think that maybe she could break the rule just once. She herself was increasingly lost in thought. Arido sat in the garden with crossed arms. His sister was nearby watching a butterfly, and the boy thought that dragons had reincarnated him 3 times, and in the 4th life he had all 7 traits. Lila reached out to catch the butterfly fluttering nearby. Aredo smiled because although he knew he had no talent, he decided to become a master of item enhancement. The young man looked at the panel showing his characteristics and realized that they needed to be hidden from everyone. He remembered the disappointments from his past life that could catch up with him in this life as well. If people around recognized him, they would start considering him a genius. This would ruin all the boy's plans. He paid no attention to Lila, who kept trying to catch the butterfly, and thought that he was even glad. He looked somewhere into the distance. The brother and sister sat near a large sprawling tree, through whose crowns sun rays pierced, and Arito looked at the village ahead, at the mountains and the boundless sky, admiring the expanse. The boy exhaled and smiled. He was glad to have been born in this village because people who know how to appreciate it do not come here. The main character had already decided who he would become. He needed to think about what to do next. The butterfly that caught his sister's attention landed on his hair. Lil reached for it, leaning on her brother's shoulder, but the insect flew away. Arito took a small stick and began to draw something on the ground. To become a master in enhancing items, he first needed to master the necessary skills. He drew a diagram in front of him. One of the blessings of the ancient gods was a skill system that allowed accumulating experience points and converting them into skills, and the number of points required to obtain a skill depended on the person. The boy thought for a moment, then smiled broadly because he knew that in the future he wanted to become a master of improving things. The teacher introduced himself and told Arito that to achieve his goal he needed 1,000 points. For rank D he needed 2,000 points, and for rank C he needed 3,500 points. And Arito looked at the master with wide open eyes. He continued that for rank B 7,000 points were needed, for rank A 15,000 points, and for rank S 45,000 points. The young man thought that he had good compatibility, and if he did not, he would need many more points. He needed at least rank C to work professionally with items. He began playing with pebbles, estimating that for rank C about 6,500 points were needed. Skill points would gradually increase even in everyday life. The door of the house slightly opened. The boy's mother peeked out, called him by name, and asked if they had sorted the herbs. The brother and sister picked up baskets of herbs from the ground and handed them to her, for which the mother thanked them. Arito thought that points would have increased if he knew what was going on. Lila went into the house, and her brother stayed outside warming up. He calculated that at 10 years old he would be able to get his first skill, and at 15 years old improve it to rank D. At this age, he planned to go to the city, then after a few years of training get a C rank, and when he became independent, fully use all his abilities and improve his skills. He wanted to promote him to the highest rank S, because that was when his path as an adventurer would begin. It was his perfect plan for the future. He dreamed of the future when suddenly someone greeted him and asked if something was bothering him. It was a beautiful young girl with long blonde hair. She apologized for addressing him so suddenly. She was in a wonderful outfit with a necklace and a cape on her shoulders. The wind blew and a leaf-shaped pin with a tassel fluttered in her hair. Arito held his breath and could not take his eyes off the girl. His heart was pounding. The stranger shared her thoughts. She felt that the boy was pondering something, so she became curious. The boy waved his hands in panic, denying that anything had happened, and replied that he was only imagining the perfect future. The girl rested her head on her hand and looked at the main character with concern, calling him a poor soul. She believed that the future was vague and could not be predicted, and Arito tried to understand why she said that to a 5-year-old child. He looked at the girl with long braided hair with confusion. She was reaching out to him, and he did not understand what was going on with this woman. Suddenly the stranger hugged him and pressed him to herself. Arito did not have time to understand anything and did not resist. She stroked his head and said that now and in the distant future everything would be fine with him. Drops of sweat appeared on the boy's face and hands, and he could not understand what was happening. The girl continued to hug him, and the young man did not understand what was happening. He tried to calm down and could not comprehend why he received this award. The question was never asked. The boy was silent, and the stranger suddenly said that divine dragons can bless only once in a lifetime. She looked at the boy compassionately, and, holding him in her arms, said that now, since he was reborn, everything is different, and asked him to live happily this time. The girl added that it was a small gift from her, and the boy still did not understand what she was talking about. She closed her eyes, smiled, and asked him to forget about it, because their meeting was like a bubble that would disappear when it rose. Arito listened with closed eyes as the girl holding his head in her hands wished him sweet dreams. The next moment he woke up in the meadow, hair tousled, eyes wide open, saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. The boy rose on his hands and began to look around, trying to understand how he ended up there. He rubbed the top of his head, recalling what he had done. He was sure he had helped his mother, and then met someone, and in his mind appeared the image of a blonde girl with a braid. Suddenly he remembered that he was making a perfect plan for the future, and, looking at the panel, realized that he did not yet have enough points to acquire this skill. The panel displayed the number 100, 101, and the boy raised his hand to the screen and clenched his fist, rejoicing that he finally had more than 100 points. Then something stopped him. He copied all the numbers on the panel in the order they appeared and happily realized he was wrong, and this time he had more than 100,000 points on the score. Millions of questions swarmed in his head. Arito was surprised and did not understand how and where he got so many points in one day. He tried to calm down and organize his thoughts. He thought it was a dream, wondered how he could fall asleep on the roadside, and decided to go home and rest. The night retreated, morning came, and instead of the moon, the sun rose. He stood alone by the porch of his house and did not hurry to go inside. The boy already had 100,103 points on his account, and he silently looked at them, not understanding how it could have happened, because he had never even dreamed of such a thing. Since there were now more points than needed, the former knight came to the church to gain skills. He looked inside. Light poured through the windows, but there was no one in the church, not even a priest. In one of the front rows sat a figure in a hood. The boy stealthily passed by the sleeping old man, trying not to wake him. He found a book from which one could independently acquire a skill. Although Arito knew that usually a priest had to be present, he took a risk and ran his fingers over the panel. A quiet sound was heard. He turned around and looked at the man in the hood to check if he was asleep. The status was visible only to him, but other people could see similar suggestions. The young man returned to work. At first, he needed to acquire a skill. A window appeared on the panel offering to acquire the item improvement skill for 1,000 points with 2 answer options. Arito pointed his finger at the yes option. He hesitated, fear pierced him, and the world seemed to freeze. Something sounded from behind. The hero turned around, fearing that the man in the hood had woken up, but after a moment only his snoring was heard, and the young man watched silently. He exhaled. He was overwhelmed with excitement, but it seemed there was no danger, so he decided to continue what he had started. There was a slot on the panel for item enhancement. He planned to raise his rank. He counted those he had and reached the letter A. Finally, the highest S-rank item enhancement appeared on the panel. The boy paused for a moment. He was pleased by the thought that, being 5 years old, he would learn to enhance higher rank items. The thought that this was his perfect plan for the future was interrupted by the voice of an old man behind him. He was surprised that it was already morning and that the old man could notice Arito at any moment. The young man was horrified. It was time to run away from here. Someone loudly said that Arito had talent, and this made the boy flinch and drew the attention of Lila, who was standing next to her brother. The boy was 10 years old. He helped Uncle Tom, who was a dwarf, improve agricultural tools, and Tom said it was hard to find a dwarf who chased a dream in old age, but Arito disagreed and thought Uncle said that to everyone. Uncle said that gnomes are a people who dream of creating magnificent things from scratch. The boys politely rejoiced, but one boy actually thought about how many times he had already heard that. Uncle Tom knew they were not inclined either to continue someone else's work or to start from scratch, but he just wanted to create a luxurious outfit. It is no secret that even gnomes need a lot of time and effort to create items from scratch. Because of this, he left the gnome village and decided to become a craftsman who makes items. From time to time, he improved his skills in a famous workshop, but eventually failed because he had only one attribute. The dwarf told how he hit a wall that could not be overcome by effort alone, when Arito's sister, still catching butterflies, rushed past him at incredible speed. The younger sister finally achieved her goal. The insect ended up in her hands, but the dwarf began to say that this girl was a little monster and dangerous. Leo got scared and froze, and her brother, smiling, contradicted the old man's words. The boy wondered why it was impossible to strengthen one thing several times with one attribute. Then he scolded his sister a little for her joke, and the girl completely lost heart. Uncle Tom propped his head with his hand and smiled at Arito's suggestion. He wished everything were that simple. He told the boy that you cannot endlessly strengthen one item. The gnome tapped on the wooden stick he was holding. He added that you cannot just take a stick and strengthen it hundreds of times with earth power to make it comparable to steel. The children heard that each object has a certain number of slots that can be filled with attributes. It is known that the number of slots can vary depending on the quality of the item, and even if 2 items are made from the same material, the number of slots depends on different parts. He decided that with experience and knowledge, one can find out how many times an item can be strengthened. The boys had long fallen silent and were watching the storyteller attentively. Arito dared to object that it was easy to determine if you knew how to evaluate. Uncle Tom looked at the young man, who was surprised by his words. He disagreed and corrected him, saying that evaluation is a skill that allows you to learn about the condition of a person or item and all existing improvements, but the number of slots remains unknown. Leo said that their knowledge and experience were truly important. The gnome coughed. He lied when he said he supposedly had the intuition of a master. Tom smiled broadly, crossed his arms, and said that there is one way. Arito could not believe his ears and was glad to hear it, while his little sister silently waited for the continuation of the story. The old man raised his index finger and continued, saying that every master who improves items wants to master this skill. It is called analysis. A narrow river flows through the meadow and forms a small waterfall. The quiet babbling of water can be heard. The boy found himself in the same meadow, looked into the distance, and said that analysis is the ability to reveal the essence of a person or object, which a simple evaluation cannot provide. In the tall grass lay someone's slippers. The protagonist crouched and picked them up, thinking that someone had probably lost their footwear. He raised the slipper higher and opened the panel. He thought he might take them home and try to strengthen them. But Arito quickly abandoned this idea because he did not know how many enhancement slots there were. He examined the find for a while, then threw it away without regret, and said he wished he knew this data. The boy lay down on the grass, put his hands under his head, and began to look at the sky. A swarm of thoughts buzzed in his head that, by applying analytical skills, he could figure it out. He closed his eyes and tried to cope with the growing anger and frustration. He really wanted to master this skill, but there was some obstacle in the way. Uncle Tom said that the ability to analyze is special and hard to acquire or learn if you are not born with it. He said that, unlike other skills, it cannot be learned in a church. You can only obtain it if you find a very rare artifact or pass divine trials. Arito realized that this skill is very hard to acquire, so it became even more valuable. If he simultaneously had an S level in item enhancement and the analysis skill, then as an enhancement master he would fear nothing. The main character was so inspired by this idea that he immediately stood up and said that he had made up his mind, and now his new goal would be to master this skill. He stood up and picked up the bag from the ground. He did not know how to master this skill, so he started by gathering information. The boy shouted a battle cry and took only one step when he heard a voice behind him and stumbled. The voice said that his older sister had come and asked if the hero was in trouble. Arito thought everything was fine until he met a stranger, and turned around to find out who had disturbed him. A sweet girl with decorations and accessories in her hair smiled at him, assured him that he could tell his sister everything, and was confident that he definitely had problems. The young man looked at the stranger in shock and could not utter a word. He was struck by her beauty, but something troubled him, and suddenly his eyes widened, and he became even more frightened than before. The guests came very close and loomed over the young man. She was very surprised and asked where he got 27,000 points from. The girl looked more closely. Besides what was just said, she saw that Arito had improved ranked items. She wanted to understand if she had been outpaced in this. The boy continued to look silently. Silence fell between them. The young man could not understand how she could know this, and he was frightened by the thought that she could evaluate. The girl thought, and asked the boy if she understood correctly that he wanted to become a master of item enhancement. He confirmed this, and the girl smiled and offered a solution. She reached out to him and kissed him. Arito froze in place and did not react at all. He was stunned and did not understand what was happening. The girl smiled and thanked the boy. She was watching the main character closely, waiting for his reaction to what had happened. He began to stutter due to the stress he experienced. But he still managed to ask why she, a stranger, had acted that way. He had no thoughts in his head. She laughed and replied that it was just a gift for him. The girl smiled widely, waved her hand at him, and said that in a past life he had not succeeded, but she hoped that in this life he would live happily. Arito became more and more confused. His mind clouded, and he could not understand what she was talking about. Meanwhile, the guest continued and asked to forget about their meeting. She put a finger to her lips and suggested keeping it a secret. Arito lowered his hands to the ground and trembled. A white-winged butterfly landed on his hair. He woke up, frowned, and squinted. The boy began rubbing his eyes and tried to understand what the light was. The butterfly flapped its wings and flew away. The boy rose on his elbows and began looking around to understand where he was. He grabbed his head, started to remember how he helped, but got tired, and the feeling of threat from the events disappeared. His gaze fell on the slippers lying nearby. Arito picked them up and remembered that he wanted to reinforce them, but could not because he did not know how many slits there were. He sat down, crossed his legs, and opened the panel. With a broad motion, he ran his finger over it. If he had an analysis, he would definitely know how many gaps there were. There was no such information, so he decided to try to reinforce them. Then he noticed something. The screen showed slots with an exact number. The hero nodded, remembering that this was exactly how it was supposed to look. Arito realized that the slots were not supposed to be displayed on his panel. He threw the slipper and was searching for something on the panel when a signal sounded. The cell he had been waiting for appeared before his eyes. His hand froze. The hero mastered the skill of analysis. He silently watched it, as if he couldn't believe it was really happening. The boy looked ahead and tried to understand everything. He couldn't explain what had happened while he was asleep. He was scared. He knew the skill could not have appeared by itself. He glanced back at the slippers he had just thrown away. An unwanted thought flashed through his mind, but he still wanted to make sure. The boy reached for the slippers and thought it was a good chance to test this skill. The panel showed various information about the item, its characteristics, magical power, and effects. At the top was written Holy Slipper, and below it the inscription Holy Walk. The young man saw that everything was really happening. The panel showed 2 rows of slots, and the number of enhancements corresponded to the number of times he had activated them. He looked closely and noticed that after enhancing the attribute late, an effect called Holy Walk appeared. Arito did not know what it was. Lily appeared behind her brother. She crouched down and asked him what he was doing. The boy was so deep in thought that he almost automatically told her he was learning to analyze, but stopped in time. He shuddered, closed the panel, and sharply turned around. Then he asked his sister what she was doing there. She replied that he had disappeared somewhere, so she went to look for him. Arito understood everything, apologized, and thanked her. Leo simply beamed and smiled sincerely. The boy decided to check the analysis later. The boys held hands and went home. There, as the little girl said, they were to eat stewed meat, and the brother and sister were very happy about it. From the window, part of the crown of the neighboring tree was visible in the room. Evening was approaching. Arito sat on the edge of the bed and sighed, wiping his head with a towel. Finally, he was alone and could figure everything out, so he opened the tab that interested him the most, namely the Holy Shoes, the missing part of HP, and the effect of the Holy Walk. A system window appeared with a message that by wearing the Holy Walk, the curse would be removed and strength would be restored during walking. The main character, stunned, repeated what he had just read. The boy looked at the slipper in his hands with pleasure. For him, this was amazing news because the restoration could help in a difficult moment, and he thought that this could fill one more slot. Arito began to browse the panel. It said that only one property could be in one row, so there was no choice. The boy smiled, looked at the screen, and performed the last action, using the enhancement. A new emblem with the inscription Foot Massage appeared on the panel. He thought that now, if worn, health would be restored, so it became more practical. He also noticed that the effectiveness increased, while strength and magic did not change. His younger sister was sleeping next to him. The boy laughed. It was a good find for him. He looked at the other slipper in front of him and remembered that effects change depending on the property. He decided to check, took the other slipper, and opened the panel with abilities and effects. A system window appeared, explaining what the deadly walk was. It stated that once a person put on these slippers, they could not be removed, and during walking, damage would be inflicted. The boy understood that this was the effect of a curse. Arito looked at his item with some satisfaction, as if the danger did not scare him but attracted him, and he wondered what would happen if he wore both slippers. A young man decided that it was too dangerous, did not check his idea, got out of bed, put the slipper in the drawer, and thought how glad he was to have an analysis. He extinguished the candle on the table and began to lie down to sleep, covered with a blanket, thinking how lucky he was to have such a skill. Arito lay on the bed next to his sister and began to fall asleep, realizing that he still needed to gain knowledge and experience. 5 years ago, spring came. In the meadow, the wind swayed the flowers and drove the leaves under the gloomy sky. The boy was already 15 years old, and that day he was going to leave the village. There was a smile on his face as if he was not afraid. He had to leave the village where he was born and raised. The main character opened the door, and through the crack light poured into the room. He was preparing to go to the city for training. He said goodbye to his parents right on the street. They said a few parting words. His mother asked him to take care of himself, and his father asked him not to let them down. The boy smiled at the family and promised to do his best. The difference in height between the father, mother, student, and old man with a cane was very noticeable. Uncle Tom called the boy and asked him to take something. He wanted to make a farewell gift and told her to use it wisely. In Arito's hands was a small pouch in which something rattled. He looked at it and only guessed what could be inside. The old man added that there was not much money there, but it would be enough to live about a week in the city. He, like the boy's parents, cared about him. The hero looked at the master with wide-open eyes and was speechless with surprise. He thanked everyone and promised not only to succeed, but also to return. Arito raised his hand, waved goodbye to them, and smiling, set off on his journey. He took the first step towards adventures, leaving behind his parents, Uncle Tom, and the villagers, against the backdrop of a pine forest. If you count all 4 lives he lived, it comes to 135 years, And this is the first time someone had been so kind to him. The hero clenched his fists. He was ready to do everything possible to fulfill his dream and meet the expectations of his loved ones. The young man walked through the forest looking depressed, thinking that even though he had decided to leave, he would still miss everyone, and sadly realized that sooner or later he would leave this village. Oredo smiled when he remembered Uncle Tom. He never thought that the dwarf would be at such a low level because he had almost no experience in item enhancement. Tom had very few enhancement recipes, all of which were for household appliances, and the only opponent of the young man was a raccoon. So the man finally went to the city. In his backpack were weapons, armor, and money, and he spent points on HP and MP, which was displayed on the panel. The hero closed the screen and moved on. He looked upset. The only thing he regretted was that he couldn't say goodbye to his sister. Rows of cypress trees grew on both sides, and a flock of birds flew over their tops. The boy stopped in front of the small town, full of charming wooden houses. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with relief, and exhaled, because he made it here before sunset. Arito weighed the bag in his hand. He did not want to spend the night in the field, but he also did not want to spend money. The hero looked around and saw a local man with a horse nearby. He thought he could spend the night in the stable. Suddenly, someone called the boy. He looked to see who was calling him. A woman in heels was standing in front of him. He was silent and anxiously waited to see what she wanted from him. A blonde girl in an elegant dress with a hairpin asked if something was bothering the young man. The woman repeated her question and wanted to know if he had any fears. She smiled, crossed her arms over her chest, and looked at him, waiting for an answer. Rado asked in fright if she was really talking to him when the stranger's expression changed, and she looked closely at the man as if she noticed something unexpected in him. The girl got angry and said that they had already contacted him. She tried to understand how late she was. The young man grimaced. He had no idea what it was about. The woman's eyes clouded. She did not know what to do next. The boy liked the girl, but she seemed strange to him. The stranger added that she had only one thing left that she could give him. It was the only thing she could do, and no one else would do it. Areto did not understand what that meant, but the girl was determined. She took the hero by the hand and told him to follow her because it could not be done here. The boy did not have time to come to his senses and ask her to wait because she forcibly pulled him along. He was frightened by the girl's behavior, and he tried to get an answer from her about where they were going. Arito was surprised when the lady replied that they were heading to the hotel, because he himself had no intention of going there. The lady gave the seller his money and wished them a good rest in the best room, and the boy was horrified because he did not even notice when she took it from them. The door creaked, and in the middle of the room stood a double bed. The young man looked at the bag of money with tears in his eyes and thought that he would be better off in the barn, because there was only one bed in the room, and the girl seemed quite satisfied. The main character was stunned when the stranger turned out to be naked and told him to do the same. He did not understand why she did it. She was going to do what she had to. Oredo lay on the bed and covered his eyes with his hands, ashamed to look at the girl. The woman said that she had already brought him chaos and firmly grabbed him by the shoulder. Then she leaned over the boy. To break the rule, she needed physical contact. The girl said that she wanted to give him knowledge about this world, but only that which their predecessors had revealed. She assured him that with all 7 attributes he would be able to find all known improvements. She knew that the best night of his life would vanish from memory like smoke, and this would most likely be offensive. She had never done this before, so she asked him to treat her gently. Sunlight poured through the windows without curtains. The main character was sleeping, but something woke him up and he sneezed. Oredo got out of bed. He was very cold, and he couldn't understand where his things had gone. He began to dress and was surprised to find himself in a hotel and in such a large room, then checked his pouch with money. There was little money left. He raised his hand to his face and lamented that he had acted that way and spent the money he received from his relatives. Suddenly he was overcome by a strange new feeling. While he was sleeping, he was supposed to have been awarded many more points than he received. He thought that if the magical increase of points or skills repeated, he opened the panel and began to search, but the scheme of his abilities had not changed. The boy noticed that the status had not changed. The indicators remained low, and the points had not increased. He did not lose hope and decided to check his skills. Maybe a new skill had appeared. After a moment, he froze and looked at the panel with his mouth open. Illustrations of improvements appeared on it. Now the boy could at any time refer to the recipes for item improvements. On the screen, the hero found many recipes. It was a skill he had never heard of, and Arito considered it suspicious. He looked around. This day before, the young man had decided to try to improve his weapon. The boy left the sword, leaning it against the edge of the bed. He remembered that he received it as a gift from a traveling church servant to protect himself from monsters in case of an attack. However, the man himself advised him to run away. The traveler continued to insist on using the sword only when it was really necessary. Then he corrected himself, recalling that Arito was much older than his peers and would understand everything. The word old seemed to hit the boy in the chest. The main character was grateful but thought that this expression was unnecessary. Casting aside memories, the young man reviewed the indicators on the panel and saw that the sword had 27 hit points and was very worn out. Arito knew that HP was the same as a person's condition, so if it reached 0, the item would break. The boy examined the panel and realized that the item's efficiency indicator appeared when it was used as intended. The screen also displayed a strength or endurance indicator, where an increase in strength correspondingly raised HP. The last remaining was magical power, namely the indicators of magical power and magic resistance. The sword had 2 slots. The boy said that this was the basics of basics, and that a fire attribute could be added, which would improve efficiency. Arito clenched his fist and raised it above his head, shouting a battle cry. He wanted to postpone explanations and try to carry out his plan. The sword's condition changed, and he noticed a new property. It was possible to try a fire strike, a technique of slashing sword strikes with fire. But the boy understood that due to the low level, the effect would be weak. He raised his hand above the plate on the panel, confirmed the action, and froze, thinking carefully. Even if he improved the sword with 4 properties, it would only slightly increase efficiency in 2 slots. He did not know if there would be room for romance. Like fire and water, when darkness and light conflict, their combination reduces effectiveness. Only chaos remains, but the boy does not know this, because neither humans nor non-humans can control him. The young man was embarrassed and decided to try to show improvement in practice, because it required many points. For improvement, he receives points like experience, so he ran his finger over the panel and pressed the confirmation button, deciding to do it. Changes on the screen angered Arito because his status was lowered. A new effect appeared, a self-destructing sword. The hero realized that the item's remaining HP was spent on dealing incredible damage, and the sword shattered into pieces. It could be used like an ordinary sword, but its characteristics were like those of a wooden stick. The boy looked at the sword and thought that chaos was completely useless, but almost immediately rejected this thought and decided to combine chaos with another attribute. He pressed a few more buttons on the panel, decided to take a risk, and saw that the information on the screen had changed. Arito was glad to notice that all indicators had increased, and it turned out to be even better than the combination of 2 fires. The boy began to analyze that the attribute of chaos works only when it is fully charged and combined with other attributes. He raised the sword up and said that combining it with the fire of good was a good idea, but he wanted to make the sword even stronger. He got the idea to strengthen it with light or darkness. The boy decided to remove the fire first, then add darkness. Pressing the necessary plates on the panel, he confirmed his consent once again. The sword in Arito's hands gleamed and he froze, waiting for the transformation. The weapon that hissed transformed. Its appearance was very strange. There were monograms on the handle, and the tip had an unusual shape. He felt that the sword radiated a sinister aura. Using his assessment skill, he realized that the sword had become magical. Rank A was quite strong. Arito noticed that the magical power had risen to C rank, and the poisonous strike was supposed to have a good effect. Considering the mana, the boy could use it only once. It was impressive for him. He was no longer afraid of monsters because with this sword, even with low stats, he could destroy them all, and even a simple wound was considered a victory. The grass swayed at the wind. A young man stood in the forest holding a sword in his hands, and for the first time in his life was about to test it. In the middle of the clearing lay a huge boulder. Arito adjusted his grip on the sword handle. He knew the sword was at least rank A and could easily cut through stone. He thought he would succeed, so he quickened his pace, his boots scraping the ground, then lifted the sword from his shoulder and threw it forward with all his might, hitting a boulder in the middle of the forest thickets. The boy was grinding his teeth and his hands were trembling. He groaned in pain and waved his hands in the air to make it pass faster. He felt like he had hardly hurt anything and it didn't look like a cut at all, but there wasn't a single crack on the boulder. Arito did not understand why it happened and thought that maybe his status was too low. He began to get nervous and looked around for an exit, then noticed his armor and decided to reinforce it. It was not even armor, but a pot lid, which was also given to him as a gift. Uncle Tom strictly forbade him to fight and said that when monsters attack, the first thing to do is run away. He also advised throwing the lid at them if necessary, and Arito knew that if he reinforced it with earth, the item would become stronger. But it was just a pot lid with a small bonus to stats, and he couldn't fill one slot with chaos, so he decided to use the wind, and the lid started to glow. The name Flying Storm Cap appeared on the panel, which seemed strange to the boy, and the Flight Plus effect also appeared, allowing him to throw the item farther and hit the target accurately. The boy took a risk and threw the lid. It flew in such a way that it cut a pear from the tree. Arita watched this with curiosity and admiration. He crouched down and reached for the lid. The result turned out to be much more useful than the hero initially thought. He decided that the wind was just right for the lid. Uncle Tom's motto about refusal and control became a reality. He put the sword aside. The upgrade was complete. He realized that although the monsters were weak, they would now start to appear, so he needed to be more careful. A flock of birds flew across the sky. In the forest, a girl named Kavalis was being scolded. They said her act was vile and she should be ashamed. She turned to Sierra and asked him not to shout at her. She felt she had no other choice. Since the only way to convey something to the boy was through direct physical contact, it shocked Sierra. The third girl was worried that many problems could arise if one of the three goddesses lost her virginity. Qualis did not think it would affect her much. Perhaps she simply would not be able to return to her original form. Two goddesses insisted that it was too serious, while the third thought it would be good to end life while the world was in such a form. Sierra thought it was too much because that girl created a new skill for the boy and passed it to him, and in her opinion, it was unfair. The goddess objected that she created it for the master who passed her trial 100 years ago, and after his death, the skill returned to her, but she did not need it at all. Hearing the answer, the girl darkened and tried to understand why she had abandoned her analytical abilities. The third goddess did not feel a difference because it was more important for her that Arito lived happily, and after his death, this ability would return. She was fishing while the girls argued about darkness, talked about that boy as if he were her child, and she had a strong maternal instinct. It seemed to her that Chan thought she had given her nothing valuable. The goddess was outraged, and Darkness thought that although they did not give people any special advantages, it was worth asking what he wanted. Sierra cried. She knew that glasses were always in short supply, but the property of light was the least valuable because it was the most common. There was nothing more to give, but she wanted to help the hero a little while he became a master in item enhancement. She decided to do it, and Dark said goodbye. The goddess asked her who she would become. She took the staff in her hands and began to spin it. She threw her sword over her shoulder and answered that she would become an adventurer. In this form, she was weaker, but because of that, she was having more fun. Sarah understood her and rejoiced, then asked what Qualis thought about it. She replied that she wanted to become an alchemist. Goddess Sarah rejoiced upon hearing that the alchemist creates items and potions. When the adventurer uses them, it is also related to item enhancement. The girls did not wait for her to finish the story, said goodbye and left, leaving her alone with thoughts about Rito. She was left alone in the forest, and only the birds heard her cries about injustice. Some girl quickly turned around. A huge snake crawled toward her and hissed. The girl moved her foot aside and prepared to jump. During the flight, she kicked the snake and landed softly. Then she touched the ground and, feeling something, shifted her gaze into the forest thicket. She straightened to her full height and became alert. The leg of a large monster fell to the ground very close by. The monster knocked down trees and went off with a roar. His appearance was terrible. A small fish was splashing in the river. Arito was walking through the forest and pushed aside a small branch with his hand. 3 days had passed since you left the city. The sun was slowly setting, and the boy hoped to make it before night. Suddenly he heard a sound. The boy turned around in fright, not understanding what kind of earthquake it was. It could not have been someone's footsteps, because large monsters live here. If the monster is weak, the young man will easily handle it. An animal jumped out onto the road here. It was a rabbit, and not just one. The boy was surprised that there was a whole group of them, because usually this rarely happens. He thought that they did not pay attention to the man and seemed to be running away from someone. A flock of birds flew up from the treetops into the sky. A loud roar sounded. The sound was approaching. Someone was coming quickly and was huge. A girl appeared in front of Arito with a loud scream and was crying. A few days later, the boy asked her how she was doing. The girl silently looked at the traveler, and then she just jumped on him, and I knocked him down. She screamed with joy because it was her brother. She threw him to the ground and started crying, and the young man tried to calm her down. Lily inherited the blood of the great blue wolf from one of the oldest werewolf tribes. Once Arito was only 3 years old and he was playing at home. His mother found a werewolf with a child on the outskirts of the village, but his injuries were too serious and he died after 3 days. He entrusted them with his child, and they accepted him into their family. This is the story of Lily. The main character wanted to find out what Lila was doing there. She replied that her brother had left the village, and she decided to follow him. The girl was depressed. She was sure that Oreto's brother would not take her with him, so she decided to leave without telling anyone. The boy understood why she did not see him off then. The young man exhaled. He could not believe his ears. He stroked his sister's head. She looked at him with tears in her eyes, and he said he was glad nothing had happened to her. The girl smiled. Arito thought she was angry because he left, but he was glad to see her. And suddenly something appeared behind him. A huge monster appeared. The boys were very scared and could not understand what it was. The monster had huge teeth and protruding fangs. A giant hand began chopping down trees. Having analyzed, the boy identified the monster's features. He was very surprised that a hunchbacked ogre, a level B monster, appeared before him. The boy did not have time to understand what a monster of this level was doing here. His main task was to protect Leo. He drew his sword and smiled threateningly. The system window reported a bonus to the attribute, namely strength increased by 40%. Although the monster was rank B, it had a magic sword. The monster became enraged and, letting out a wild roar, raised its hand above the boys to strike with all its might. Reto realized with regret that he probably would not get out alive. In all his 3 lives, he had never given up. So smiling, he grabbed his pot lid and added a 20% efficiency bonus to it. The ogre hit the ground and the brother and sister were thrown backward. The boy stopped, planted his feet firmly on the ground. A message appeared that the shield could be used 5 more times. Arito came up with another option because even if they tried to run, the monster would catch them at such a distance. The monster opened its jaws and roared. The boy told his sister to stay put, and she asked him what he was going to do. Her brother ran straight at the ogre and drew his sword because he wanted to destroy it. He applied the petrification effect, and the monster froze. Arito decided to use the self-destruction effect. He knew he had only one attempt and that he could do it. After the sword, he took the shield. Then he jumped up and struck each of them in turn. And finally, he activated the self-destruction effect and raised his unique sword. He struck, and a blinding flash appeared. Laya looked away, unable to withstand such bright light. Then there was a powerful explosion, visible from afar. The gods gave this world several blessings. One of them is the life points HP system. As long as your health points are not 0, you will feel pain or numbness, but you will not die. If they become 0, you will die. Even a simple fall can cause death. HP can be in humans, demi-humans, monsters, demons, armor, and weapons, but the system does not affect plants, animals, stones, etc. It is the life system in their world. Arito fell to the ground and hit his back, exhaled, was covered in scratches, and knew it was very dangerous. Health remained 7 out of 150. Alarmed Lila ran to her brother. He squinted from pain, but first asked if she was okay, and Lila replied that she was not injured. The boy wanted to find out how much damage he had dealt to the ogre. The monster let out a quiet roar. Its health was at 0, and there was a huge hole in its stomach. The main character noticed that the monster had no life left. The monster looked at him with empty eyes. But the boy himself had used up all his mana. He sent his sister to finish off the ogre, and Lila immediately obeyed. The girl performed her signature kick and landed. Then she turned around and used freeze. Alredo's younger sister dealt a decisive blow to the monster's jaw, and the boy rejoiced at her success, watching the fight in the light. The ogre loudly fell unconscious even before the girl managed to land. Lael descended to the ground and took a fighting stance. Thanks to his skill, the brother could see all her features in reality. The girl ran up to him, and they gave each other a high five, because they were very happy that they succeeded. Suddenly the boys noticed a bright glow near the ogre. It was some kind of sphere hanging in the air and shining. The young man realized that this item was given to them for the victory over the monster, and told Lily to take it. She immediately agreed, ran after it, and soon the glow was in her hands. Instead, a bottle of ogre water appeared in her hands. Arito noticed that it had the attribute of darkness and the effect of a stomach curse. The girl, who did not know this, offered her brother to try it, and this embarrassed him. He immediately explained to her that this was a liquid that accumulates in the ogre's hump, and if you drink it, your stomach will hurt and a curse will befall you. Leo's desire to try it disappeared instantly. The boys sat at the edge of the forest. The girl used the skill of weak healing to ease her brother's back pain. He was sure that his sister had not told Mom and Dad that she was leaving, but she surprised him by doing the opposite. Her parents supported her, and said they were glad to hear it, because the girl was really sad about her brother's departure. Since Mom and Dad agreed with this decision, Arito decided there was nothing to be done, so he suggested to his sister to go further with him, and she gladly agreed. They walked, holding hands, through the forest and thickets, and the girl sang joyful songs because she was finally with her brother. The goddess hid behind one of the trees and watched the boys. She was confident that he would achieve what he wanted. The goddess was already thinking of helping him before she gave him the ability. But the young man turned out to be stronger than she expected, and she noticed that he had a girlfriend, so everything was fine. She was upset that she could not secretly follow him because Sira would scold her for that. However, she was going to kill only those monsters that stood in her way. She did not consider this a sign of bias. Tonight the sunset ended, and the moon and stars appeared in the sky. Arito and Lele reached the city and did not meet a single monster. The boy considered himself very lucky, and his sister was hungry. Her brother, opening the door of some establishment, said that they had really traveled for a long time and it would not hurt to eat something. There were many people in the tavern, some just drinking, others ordering food. The waitress was bringing dishes to the tables, and another worker was standing behind the bar. A woman with a short haircut greeted them and, not recognizing the boys, decided that they were not from here. She asked what they wanted to order. The boy put a few coins on the table and asked them to bring something for both of them, as well as milk and water. He twisted another coin in his hands and suggested talking later because he really wanted to listen to stories, and the waitress smiled at the boy's cleverness. They agreed. The woman promised to tell him everything he wanted, and meanwhile she would bring them food. She warned that their establishment was a bit noisy. A group of people sat in the distance. They were tipsy and behaved rudely, but Arito was not afraid, because soon from such an amount of alcohol they would simply fall asleep and become silent. The old man at the neighboring table laughed and decided not to bother them. This group was in a good mood. Perhaps they had earned a lot of money. The old man said that they were adventurers from Zexheim, and recently sold restorative potions at inflated prices, and the boy asked if demons had attacked them or if there was a plague. In fact, the mayor's daughter fell under a strange curse. 3 days ago, the mayor sent his envoy to Zexheim to find a way to cure her. But he still had not returned and her health began to decline sharply. The boy thought that riding there, settling the matter, and returning would take him 2 days. His thoughts were interrupted by a waitress who brought the order and apologized for the long wait. The young man was ready to eat everything that was on the table. The old man nearby was already about to leave. Arito knew that the dishes would be more expensive and feared that he would not have enough money. The waitress wanted to apologize for the noise and the establishment and asked what he wanted to know. She sat in the old man's place at the nearby table and hoped that the conversation would not be about noisy drunks. The main character said that he was heading to Zexheim, where he wanted to become a master of item enhancement. The woman replied that it was a city of adventurers and there were many forges, as well as shops with weapons, armor, and other things. But she had also heard about workshops for item enhancement. He thanked her and asked if there were any rumors in the city, and the woman thought and recalled that recently a new dungeon or something similar had supposedly been opened. Arito rejoiced at what he heard. The waitress said that it was in the mountains not far from the city, where the brave ventured and did not return, and the Seekers Guild was now recruiting a team. She did not know the size of the dungeon because, due to the mayor's daughter's curse, they had no time for that, and her story was interrupted by noisy guests whose drinks had run out and who loudly demanded more. The woman began to get up from the table, and the boy handed her coins, thanking her for the conversation, although the lady considered it unimportant. It was important to him. The girl kept shouting, so he agreed to help the waitress to repay her for treating them. They thanked the company for waiting and served drinks. They were very happy about this, clinked their glasses, and continued the meeting in the same mood. After the first sip, the men decided that this alcohol was much better than the previous one. The traveler advised them not to rush and said that now they would definitely be silent. Lily was surprised and asked why he was so sure. The men began to feel drowsy, and the boy was glad and said that he had already told his sister about it. He said that the company would get drunk and fall asleep, and that is exactly what happened. The young man thought that the fire made the drink tastier and stronger, but in the morning they would face a severe hangover as punishment for the noise. The young man said that it might have been a waste of points, but now they could eat peacefully. When all the dishes were eaten, the boys thanked the staff. The door opened, they were wished a good journey, the food was delicious, now they needed to take a bath, but Arito had one more task. Night had already come, but he still needed time to meet with the mayor. A candle was burning outside the window. A very fat man was lying in bed and sobbing. The sky was covered with clouds. Near the fortress, which partly resembled ruins, a pursuit was heard. The girl in heels seemed to be running away from the pursuer. She was surrounded by black dust and did not know where to run. The elegant metal gates opened. Arito and Lila stood in front of a luxurious, wealthy house. It was the mayor's estate. The guys were impressed by how big the house was. The younger sister admitted that she was a little scared, and the brother assured her that everything was fine. He just needed to ask a few questions. The young man knocked on the door, said he was a traveler, and apologized for disturbing us. He took with him some ogre water from the stomach curse and hoped that this bottle would help. The main character uses the illustration skill and learns that ogre water can be used to remove curses by enhancing it with light. Does not work on all curses, but helps with some. However, they did not say which curse it was, and no matter how much the brother and sister asked, no one knew. The butler invited them to the estate. To find out if the ogre water would help, They first needed to know what type of curse it was. They sat on the sofa and waited. Orito could not believe that the mayor had brought the first teenager he met, and he said he could help with the curse. He doubted whether they were really that desperate. The door opened and a man stood before them. It was Mayor Thomas, who wanted to find out which of the boys could lift the curse from his daughter, and then immediately started crying, confusing the newly arrived guests. The boy repeated the words, and the old man cried, grabbing his hand. The mayor realized this might be a vain hope, because the boy was very young, but decided to believe and ordered the curse to be lifted. The old man led the guest into his daughter's room, and although the young man resisted, the old man did not pay any attention to him at all. The mayor promised a decent reward if Herr Tu helped, although he himself wanted to ask for something else. Suddenly the man became serious and warned that the magic of his daughter must remain a secret, otherwise he would spend a lot of money hiring S-rank hunters to eliminate those he told. And the boy did not argue and said he understood. He also understood that he should not interfere in what did not concern him. The old man was unyielding and kept repeating that they had little time. The three of them stopped in the corridor opposite the girl's room. The mayor opened the door, and the travelers looked inside. In the room, only one candle was burning and nothing was visible. The boy could not use analysis because it was too dark, but he still saw the outline of a silhouette on the bed. He heard some sounds from the depths of the room and became confused. The young man decided that it was his breath. The woman mayor said that she was getting worse every day and reminded him that he should not talk about the curse and about how her daughter looked. Orito swallowed nervously and entered the room. Lila grabbed the hem of his robe. The traveler was just about to lower the canopy over the bed. Before them lay a woman so large that she occupied the entire bed. The boy looked at her swollen hands and face while she snored. He realized that she had the curse of expansion, because of which she gained weight even without eating. It did not hurt, but she could not move and her health points fell every day, so death would be long and painful. The mayor urged the main character to remove the curse, and thousands of thoughts swarmed in the boy's head, because without a rank of mage this was impossible. Even if he strengthened the ogre's water, it got out of his control. The old man began to suspect that the young man would not be able to do it, while he himself was hastily planning moves and inventing what to answer him. Suddenly he heard the girl start crying and stammering shouted help, and he froze. Orito asked Mr. Thomas and Lila to leave so he could concentrate. The mayor trusted him and asked to save Melina, then left the room and closed the door behind him. The main character was not sure about his actions, but felt he could make an ordinary copper sword magical, so he took a risk and pressed the necessary plates on the panel. He gathered himself and focused all his strength on the flask of ogre water floating between his hands and glowing. Something incredible happened. The ogre water turned into holy water. It had properties of light and chaos, and the effect was enhanced purification. Orito was stunned by his success because he really did it and now could lift the curse from Lady Melina. Only left for her to drink it. He opened the bottle and poured the contents into her mouth. Her body glowed so brightly that the boy covered his eyes with his hand. Right by the door stood Mayor Thomas and Leal, who were very worried. Then the door slightly opened, and Orito's head appeared in the gap. He called the mayor and said he was finished, and the mayor looked very anxious. Mr. Thomas then learned from the young man that the curse was lifted. He ran into the room, calling his daughter's name. She was crying, but she could already speak. Melena's father looked at her with tears in his eyes and couldn't believe that it was really over. The gentleman was very happy and constantly hugged his daughter. Lila and Orito silently watched the happy family. The girl praised her brother and said that he was wonderful. She didn't understand how he managed to lift the curse. He replied that he was just lucky. They passed by the room with empty beds. The girl couldn't resist and climbed into the bed with her legs raised. She was telling how soft it was there when the mayor approached. Her brother was about to scold her, but the gentleman did not get angry. He just laughed and said that everything was fine. The butler entered the room with a bag in his hands. Mr. Thomas said that today they should rest and have fun because they saved his daughter's life. Then he called Orito again and he turned around. The mayor was about to present the young man with a well-deserved award. In the bag were 5 million gills. He didn't want the boys to have trouble sleeping because of the weight, so he decided to reward them now. The man wanted to interrupt him, but he said that this was all he could give now, and asked them not to argue but to take it. The young man thanked the old man and took the bag with the reward from him. Mr. Thomas said that he was the one who should be thankful, apologized for the delay, and wished good night. An open bag of coins lay on the floor. The boys were enchanted by the wealth they had just received and could not believe it. Arito warned his sister that before spending money, they needed to think about how they would live in Zek's house. Lil wondered if he would update the things. The brother replied that he would, but first he planned to get a job to gain experience. The young man recalled the waitress's words that there were many smithies in this town where things were improved, and there were several vacancies. He found a few interesting smithies, but there was one obstacle. If someone saw his status, where the appraisal skill and other abilities were visible, he would definitely get into big trouble, so he wanted to somehow hide it. The girl began to worry whether her brother was okay and if he was not tired, so she suggested he take a bath. Arito agreed that a lot had happened today, said she needed to learn to wash herself independently, and was upset, so the brother made concessions. Near the bath on a small bench stood a barrel. He was soaping the girl's hair near her ears. He suggested to his sister to start going to school when they moved to Zekheim. There was a school there that trained adventurers. He asked if she was interested. The girl thought about it. The young man explained that she differed from him in that she had good physical stats, and with proper training could become an S-rank adventurer, which many people dreamed of. He told her that she could go to school but did not have to force herself to be an adventurer. The education was not limited to that, and Lil did not understand what that meant. The brother replied that they were taught not only how to become adventurers, but also what one needed to know when going out into the world. He said from his experience that there was nothing wrong with her choosing her own path. The girl argued a little. Soap bubbles were flying in the bathroom. She came up with something. Then she stood up and said that Lila would become an adventurer. Rita said that the girl would wash herself. Water was leaking through the drain. A flock of birds flew across the sky. The sun's rays pierced the coniferous forest. The boy said goodbye to Mr. Thomas and thanked him for everything. They felt sorry that he had not had breakfast, but the mayor assured them that everything was fine and he was waiting for the next meeting with them. The children waved to the master and the lackey, who stood by the gate and watched them as they left. Leela asked how far it was from here to the nearest city. The journey lasted 2 days. The boys were given talismans for protection against monsters, and the main character considered this very generous, and the talismans scared away monsters of owner level and below, but did not affect monsters of danger level A and above. Oredo said that the talisman had 2 weak stats and was useless, so he wanted to give it to his sister, but thought that he could strengthen the talisman with a darkness attribute and get a talisman that hides stats. He thought it would be too unnatural. White squares would be too strange and, on the contrary, attract even more attention. Only one attribute remained that he could rely on, so he filled 1 slot with chaos. Leo looked at her brother with interest. He was trying to understand that darkness and chaos should enhance the talisman. Suddenly the concealment effect turned into camouflage, and now he could change his status at will. He changed the status so that there would be no noise during the evaluation. He thought that a level B skill would greatly help him find a job when Lila suddenly grabbed his hand. She asked to look ahead. A view of the mountains opened before them, and something caught their attention in the distance. It was Zeheim, the city of adventurers. Their road led there. At the western gates of Zeheim stood a goddess with a scepter and thin sandals. Finally, she reached the city and was glad that Arito had not arrived here yet. She was worried about where they and Lila were now. The guys arrived in the city of adventurers and felt a special atmosphere from the first minutes. The city turned out to be very beautiful. There were many people on the streets, all hurrying about their business. The brother and sister were busy with many matters, so they decided to go to the Montenio Bank to resolve important issues. As soon as they entered, a consultant approached them, greeted them, and offered help. Arito decided to deposit money into the account. The bank consultant said that it was a deposit. The boy was asked if he had a credit card. Arito replied that he had recently arrived in the city and was not very familiar with banking matters. The bank employee said that the boys were probably not yet familiar with the unique system that operated in their city. Then the consultant called Samantha, one of his colleagues, who knew this system best. The girl approached the boys with a friendly smile and introduced herself, establishing a warm and trusting contact with them. She promised to explain the features of the unique system operating in the city. Arito was glad to meet Samantha. He was surprised because she was short. The girl explained that she had dwarfism and was 24 years old, after which she invited the boys to go with her. Samantha began explaining to Arito and Lily how to open a bank account, and at first the girl asked what amount needed to be deposited, adding that small amounts were also accepted. Arito said that there were 5 million GI in the bag, a significant amount of local currency. Samantha smiled and noted that these were not the kind of money a child would carry. The girl offered to deposit the amount into the account and provide the boys with a year of silver concierge service, 3 free financial consultations per year, assistance with finding housing, and signing a lease agreement. In Reno Bay, Samantha checked whether the coins were genuine. Arito agreed to give all his money and asked the gnome to help take little sister San Lily to school. Samantha agreed to help. The girl thanked the boy for his trust and said that before he deposited the money, she would first tell him about the unique system. It turned out that coins were hardly used because there was a card called Guili, Guilika. Money is transferred to a card with identity verification, accessible only to the owner. With your permission, relatives can use this card or receive additional cards for a joint account. Samantha read the card and asked him to touch it with his fingers. Registration was completed. The money was already processed and credited to the card. The boy asked Samantha if it was possible to improve the Gillica. She replied that all slots were blocked and that when closing the account, the card had to be returned in the same condition. The girl was curious if anyone had improved the Gillica. Arito found no valuable improvements. The map becomes lighter from the wind, heavier from the earth, tracks health using water, and its light changes color. Maybe look at the illustrations. Samantha promised to find housing for her brother and sister. Tomorrow morning they will go to look at options. The meeting is scheduled for 9 a.m. The girl thanked Arid and Lyle for their time. Then the boys went to lunch because the money was already safe. Suddenly Lyle noticed someone. Strangers are arguing, and it is interesting to find out what exactly happened. Although the team seems well balanced, they clearly have problems. The stranger asked with interest why the boys decided to leave. Arito politely said he did not want to disturb the bank entrance and asked how he could help. And the stranger introduced herself as Sierra, apologized for the suddenness, and asked to pretend they were acquainted. The unknown woman said that yesterday she registered as an adventurer. The B-rank team now wanted her to join them, and the boy listened carefully and understood what Sierra meant. Arito doubted her experience because the B-rank team could find someone more experienced, and her skills were average healing, paralysis protection, poison removal, sacred arrow, and cleansing. The boy looked carefully at Sierra. He noticed that something was wrong with her status. The status seemed a bit blurry and unnatural, and it immediately caught his attention and raised questions. Arito remembered that he and his sister had not eaten yet and decided it was time to take a lunch break. The boy apologized to Sierra. Then the boys began to prepare to leave. At that moment, the stranger offered to join because she was going to have lunch nearby. Sarah said that if Arito wanted to become a master of item enhancement, she would agree to be his first client. Arito thanked her for the trust. The boy thought that he should not relax, even if Sierra was beautiful. Although she did not seem like a bad person, he still had to be careful. Arito noticed the sacred dragon staff that heals, grants blessings, protects from curses, and has a powerful breath, and, impressed by its uniqueness, pondered the mysterious Sierra. Arito said that the staff was incredible and became interested, and Sierra explained that it was a family relic, but she did not know the details of its history. The boy admitted that he did not know how important the staff was to her, and suggested that the stranger was hiding her true origin while studying society undercover as a traveler. Arito suspected that Sarah had bad intentions and might have stolen the staff. He began to doubt this stranger. At that moment, Leo said something to her brother. The younger sister reported that her brother agreed to the proposal. Lilo was happy for Sierra. The stranger thanked Arito for understanding. At the same time, Arito had no idea what they were talking about. Sierra said that then a bigger room was needed. Lila replied that a small one was enough for her and that everyone could live together. Sierra noted that at her age it was inconvenient. Arito asked what the girls were talking about. Since Sierra had already agreed, the stranger was glad to become part of their life. And at that moment, Arito recalled the story about Sierra and pondered what he had heard. Lily liked the taste of the food. Arito apologized to the stranger for having to take care of his sister. He understood that this might cause inconvenience. In response, the stranger said that it did not bother her and she was ready to help. The younger sister wished her brother good luck. Then Sarah promised the boy that she would take care of his sister. The traveler thanked his new acquaintance. After that, he returned to his affairs. Arito thought about Sierra. She paid for the guys with a black card, the rarest one, and her people were extraordinary. The guy couldn't understand who this mysterious girl was. Shy Lila sympathized with Siri. Maybe she is really a good person. Arito decided to put it aside and focus on his own affairs. The traveler went to look for work. The employer noticed the boy's enthusiasm but said it was not enough. He advised Arito to learn to create things and explained that there would always be time to strengthen skills, but now it was necessary to expand knowledge in other areas. The man advised against upgrading because if it did not reach rank S, each upgrade would cost skill points, without which the guy would not be able to do anything. The worker replied that the improvement is pleasant, but not as effective as other skills. And as a blacksmith, it is better for him to create items from scratch. Silence. Arito was taken nowhere. He is upset. Having B rank, the adventurer was confident that everything was under control, although he specialized only in improving things. But there is nothing more to do when the boy is already refused at the doorstep. However, all the camouflage would have fallen apart, because Arito would definitely have been hired with other blacksmith skills. Lila decided to call her brother, and when he answered, He immediately asked his sister what had happened, because he was worried by her voice and wanted to understand what was going on. The younger sister responded with surprise upon hearing her brother's familiar voice on the phone. Arido, noticing the excitement in her voice, asked Lila to calm down, and then cautiously inquired if anyone was nearby. The sister explained to her brother that he had asked her to act secretly, and meanwhile Sierra anxiously inquired what had happened to Lila, because her behavior seemed strange. The younger sister called her brother to check how he was doing. Arido replied that there were no significant results yet and apologized for making her worry, and Lila supported the boy. The sister said that he could create something incredible. He replied that he actually does not create but only improves. In any case, it was impressive. Leo added that only her brother could do such a thing. During lunch, Arito decided to play with Gillica. He carefully studied its structure, and as a result gained a new skill bell which significantly expanded the card's capabilities. The boy did not fully understand how the system works. Synchronization with the database, cashless payments, and establishing connections were unclear to him, but now he can talk to Leo from afar, and this makes communication easier. The employer noted that it is necessary to know the number of slots and what attributes the item has. It is also important to understand what the combination of attributes gives, and data analysis is indispensable. Arito replied that blacksmiths lack analytical skills, unless it is innate. The employer said he had never heard of a blacksmith who made improvements only in his own city. The worker noted that she had not seen a promotion to rank S, and the adventurer said he spent points only on necessary skills, and there were definitely at least 5 blacksmiths of rank A in the city. Arito was not accepted because he was not suitable for this job. The fact that no one is considered as reinforcement is a good sign. It means that the boy practically has no competition. The adventurer turned an ordinary sword into a magical one, concealed his status, and created a powerful potion against strong curses, possessing all the necessary skills and qualities. Arito decided to refuse the job and thanked Lael for support and help. He thought it over well and realized that only he himself could make such an important decision. The boy decided not to look for a job as a hired worker, but to start his own business. Then the boys invited Sierra to go with them to the dungeon because they wanted her company, but the girl tried to refuse. At Montano Bank, Samantha greeted clients gladly and kindly. Leela, Arito, and Sierra greeted Samantha warmly and respectfully. The boy enthusiastically told her that he really wanted to start his own business as soon as possible. The bank's goal is to maximally satisfy the needs of clients by providing them with quality service and support, so the employee agreed to help the boys. Burrito showed one real estate property in the north near the gates next to shops for adventurers, another cheaper one in the south where beginners are, and a third in the center with easy access, less popular. Sierra was ready to pay rent. Arito wanted the rent to be as low as possible when divided among 3. Samantha explained that the eastern part of the city is cheaper, but there are fewer travelers there. Samantha whispered to Arito if he knew who Kiro was and where she was from, because he and his sister were supposed to live with her, and the boy replied that he did not know, but had seen her black card and thought she was a very important person. Samantha warned Arito that living with a stranger was naive. The boy asked to tell about Sarah, but Samantha knew little about her. Despite some strange moments, there were no problems with registration and card issuance. A few days ago, Sierra deposited a large sum in the bank. The bank tried to find a nobleman matching her description but could not, and it is still unknown from which kingdom this mysterious lady is. Recently, she registered as an adventurer. Although she is still a beginner, she was seen in the company of an experienced and respected adventurer known by the nickname Lone Wolf. Arito said that when they first met, Sierra was insulted. Samantha noticed that the girl was afraid in a strange city, but even Lily was kind to her, so everything was fine, and Lily and Sierra found a good place. On the first floor, the premises are divided into 2 parts. One is the owner's shop, the other is empty. On the second floor, there is a living room and dining room. On the third floor, there are 3 empty rooms for living. Arito liked the price and location. Some noted that there are somewhat strange requirements in this area that may raise questions, but she did not explain what exactly they were, leaving the details unspoken. They said the owner must be in the shop. Arito apologized for the disturbance and asked the girl in the establishment if she was the owner. The owner remarked that she had an unusual guest. The boy arrived earlier than the shop owner expected. Arito said he wanted to rent the shop and live with the girls in the 3 rooms above it. The owner agreed and suggested that they be good neighbors. The traveler thanked the girl in the shop. The owner wondered if Arito was going to check something, because from his eyes it was clear that he deserved her trust. The boy did not understand the girl. The shop owner noticed that Sierra was close to Arito, so he definitely deserved her trust. The traveler asked Sierra if she and the shop owner were friends, and the girl replied that they were just acquaintances. The owner offered to buy the boys everything they needed for life. Sierra wanted to talk to Arito alone and asked the owner not to do anything strange. She replied that she was too worried. The girl in the shop introduced herself as Qualis, an alchemist and owner of the elixir shop, which immediately caught Orito's attention. He wondered if she really opened this shop herself. As a beginner, Qualis can only make cheat potions, so it is hard for her to earn money, and Orito noticed that her skills were very low, namely alchemy, fire magic, synthesis, wind magic, and appraisal. The boy noticed a strange balance of Qualis' traits and assumed it was due to her magical specialization. Her status was undefined. At that moment, Quala noticed his gaze and asked what the adventurer was looking at. Arito apologized for his distraction and quickly realized that Qualis needed a shop for item enhancement nearby, as it would allow her to improve the quality and effectiveness of her elixirs and sell them for more. Qualis asked Arito to show the skill of turning an ordinary potion into an expensive and valuable one. Arito agreed to take on one bottle, but Qualis unexpectedly placed a whole batch of potions before him. The girl had a large bag with many compartments from which she took out potions. Arito was surprised by its capacity. It holds 10 times more than it seems. Qualis doubted that Arito could improve the potions, but he assured her that he could. He started with a restorative potion that restored 50 HP and cost about 2,000 gilli. In general, the fire property was added to increase effectiveness, but restorative items are water-based, and these two properties are incompatible, so it is best to add more water. The owner liked the improved restorative potion. Now it costs 5 times more. Qual appreciated Arito's high skill level. Now the boy has to show his level to the customers. The next improvement is a potion that is in great demand among adventurers because it is very effective against many monsters due to its powerful poison. Magical power in adventures. Arito noted that these potions will be sold even more expensively. Quality work in the style of Qualis. However, the owner of the bag was left with an important mystery. She thought that to improve things, you usually have to strain and frown and also wait longer. The boy said it was better to keep it a secret, asked to take the rest of the potions with him and finish at home to concentrate better, and Qualis allowed and asked to turn the rest of the potions into antidotes. The owner promised the adventurer 80% of all proceeds from the sale of the potions. In addition, she allowed him to choose one of her spacious bags. Arito was surprised that he would get so many things. Qualis believes that this is not enough and asks the boy to make his bag more spacious and give her the same, and Arito thanks Qualis. The traveler quickly ran home with memories of his first unforgettable job and decided to finish what he started as soon as possible. But suddenly strange sounds began to ring around, attracting his attention. Someone is asking for help. A stranger asked if he had seen the task, but that boy asked if it was about the old fortress. The first rank A adventurers who entered there are still missing. More than 2 weeks have passed. Most adventurers are busy with new dungeons. Only an S-rank team can do this. A week after the opening, the store's sales amounted to an impressive 1,000,000 gillas, which was a great result for such a new establishment. Orito has no clients. His services are unnoticed due to low fame, and society does not accept improving items, so the boy does not know how to change the situation. Wallace joked and visited the neighbor with advice. She noted that people rarely come without a reason, especially to strangers. In her opinion, no one would suddenly ask a stranger for equipment upgrades. The shop owner advised Arito to change his approach. Instead of waiting for customers to bring items, it is better to buy goods, improve them, and sell them. The boy asked Qualis how to do it correctly. Qualis noted that it is better to sell goods directly to people or to large stores. Arito noted that the store location is not bad. Thanks to the new idea, the reputation will grow, and customers will appear. The owner said there would be a stable income. The boy noted that Qualis brews potions when in the mood. The girl replied that the shop is her hobby. Arito decided to buy goods. Qualis emphasized that first you need to choose one of 3 ways to obtain items: buying in shops or from people, killing monsters, or ordering from adventurers. The girl noted that it was necessary to consider the size of the profit, efficiency, and retail quality because it was weak, so it was better to order or buy goods, but his main goal was to become a successful adventurer. Eventually, the boy managed to kill the B-rank monster with a magic sword, so if he stocks up on items and upgrades them, weak monsters will not be a problem. Arito decided to kill monsters and collect items. The traveler thanked the owner and went to the shop. Qualis went home. It became quiet. Laya is now in preparatory classes until the evening, and Sierra set off on a journey with an old friend. They will be gone for several days. It turned out that Sierra had many acquaintances, and the girl in the store wished the boy to get to the place safely. The traveler reached the branch of a large trading company in the southern part of the city. This is a department store where all newcomers gather because there are many affordable and cheap goods. The boy decided to buy a weapon to be ready for difficulties. Arito, used to fighting with a sword, carefully examined the selection, and his gaze lingered on the bronze sword. This sword is slightly improved, according to the skill Illustration. If an attribute is assigned to an item's slot, no more attributes can be added to it, not even the same one. Items can be unlocked starting from upgrades to S level. Improvements and ratings show the total number of slots. But to understand the details, experience and intuition are needed. Otherwise, you might accidentally upgrade the wrong slot. Such unfinished things could be bought cheaply, fixed up, and then sold for more. Arito decided to carefully look for such profitable purchases. To find more slots and better weapons, it's better to look in northern shops. The boy noticed armor for 600,000 gils, probably without the necessary upgrades, so it's sold cheaply. Even if the seller buys armor and improves it, no one will buy it because to wear such armor, one must be very strong, and it does not suit him. Suddenly the girl peeked out and asked the adventurer for his opinion. The gentleman replied that it suited him perfectly, but the armor was too heavy. The saleswoman said that such armor did not suit all customers, but Arito said he had bought the armor, and the girl understood him. The boy thanked the saleswoman for her purchase. Arito bought a steel sword and armor, which turned out to be very heavy. His hands ached from the strain, but he was satisfied. Now he had the best thing in the world. The boy managed to improve the bag from Qualis, increasing its capacity by 300 times. Now the bag became interdimensional and could store a huge number of items. After 3 days of trial and error, the traveler managed to lighten the armor and sword and made them more comfortable. After that, he felt ready for the challenge. Confident in his abilities, he headed home. Arito noticed someone standing in front of his shop. The boy became interested in who this stranger in the cloak was, who looked like a real traveler. So he approached and asked the girl if she had come to see him and if she wanted to buy something. The girl threw herself into his arms and joyfully said that she had finally found an adventurer. The stranger apologized for hugging Arito too tightly. The boy did not recognize the girl. They had met recently, but she was a little different. The traveler assumed that Lady Melina was standing before him. The girl noticed that Arito had lifted the curse from her and saved her life. The boy noticed that Melina had changed. The girl realized that she could not even properly thank Arito. Therefore, Melina was ready to help the traveler with any problems. The boy thanked the lady. Was Arito interested in the old woman like Melina? The girl was ready to teach the adventurer. The boy was surprised and asked Melina to tell how she got the curse. The girl agreed to tell, not knowing where to start. She is an adventurer. Recently, her team received a mission to investigate a small old fort in the northern forest. It seems a high-ranking demon has settled there. The A-rank team, hoping to find a connection between the recent Gilram dungeon and the old fort nearby, went there. But soon a black fog appeared. Melina heard that there was an incredibly dangerous monster there, but she did not see it with her own eyes. Then she was enveloped by a black fog and she remembers nothing else. Fortunately, the girl was picked up by another team. She was able to return home, but the people Melina was with disappeared. Last week they were again assigned to investigate the fortress, and there are already adventurers ready to do it. They say the swordswoman is a loner and always completes missions alone, possibly due to a curse. But she decided to go with the priestess, another adventurer. The priestess is also strange. She registered only 10 days ago, but has not completed a single task yet. She has a very expensive staff, and they say she is the daughter of some nobleman. It is strange that the swordswoman took her along. Arito remembered Samantha's words that Sierra had just registered as an adventurer. But she was seen in the company of an experienced adventurer nicknamed Lone Wolf, so the boy asked Melina what the priestess's name was. The one who took the quest was named Dark. Melina remembered a young, swarthy girl. The priestess was named Kina. Arito thanked the lady for the answers, but was sure that Melina was talking about Sarah. The lady stood up and got ready to leave, apologized for distracting the boy from work. Melina also said that she needed help to reinforce something, so she would come again. Arito closed his shop. He thought that if he went with the priestess and the swordswoman, he would only become a burden and drag them down. The only thing the traveler could do was to believe and wait, but he had a request for Lady Qualis. The shop owner guessed that the boy needed a lot of potions to restore mana. Koala found out about this when the boys moved into 3 rooms 1 floor above, because the walls of the house were very thin, so the shop owner asked them to respect the neighbors and not make noise. If Wallace's strongest opponents found themselves in an unpleasant situation, she did not hesitate to help. The girl took Arito behind the counter without explaining the reason and asked if he was in a hurry. Dark was tired. Syra asked her to be patient and explained that it was hard for her to concentrate when she had to take care of the sanctuary at the same time. so Dark apologized because she did not want to complain. Dark noticed that it was primarily her fault that she was so relaxed and unprepared, and it was unclear where the demonic god came from. The man in armor asked Koala's son if they were going in the right direction, since they had not encountered any monsters or demons on the way. The girl replied that everything was fine, and they would be there soon. Arito understood Wallace. The boys arrived at the place where Sierra was. The girl warned the traveler. The black fog itself is not dangerous. It is a distortion of magical essence, but it contains curses that significantly reduce health when inhaled. However, there are no quality problems with Areto's armor. The boy agreed with the girl. It was strange that she noticed improvements in the armor, because it looked the same on the outside. Now the armor was steel and sacred, had a sinister destruction zone, and was light. Qualis noted that Areto's armor has the ability Sanctuary, similar to what is in Sierra's staff, and the traveler said that the fog would not be a big obstacle, but the owner should not go to such a dangerous place. Qualis said there was no need to worry because she could use her magic, but the protection was on him, so the girl asked him to protect her well, and Arito agreed. The fog is thick, dark, and gloomy. You see nothing. Qualis noted that one must be careful. Suddenly the boy saw a large number of monsters. The girl remarked that the greeting was quite lively. Arito said they had to run, there was no time for talking. At that moment, Dark noticed that the demonic god would be much more dangerous. However, the girl is annoyed that destroying the monster is pointless, because it comes back to life again. Sierra does not know, but has almost finished treatment. She asks Stark to hold on and endure a little longer because the monster can only be defeated by the property of light, which darkness does not have. Meanwhile, Arito runs with Qualis, holding the girl in his arms. The shop owner is pleased because it looks like a princess's embrace and the adventurer needs to run faster. The monsters are very slow. Arito is sure that even if Wallace falls, they definitely will not catch her. But the girl said she runs slowly, so they will catch her. The fog becomes thicker. The monsters are approaching. The shop owner is ready to return to save Rito, but the traveler does not give up. The boys broke away from the monsters, but the fog here was thicker, and it turned out that it was dangerous here too. Now the adventurer is cornered. Qualis noticed that, apparently, this is the owner of the fortress because everyone was so afraid to enter. The owner of the fort has wandering magical armor, and his characteristics are darkness, strength, agility. Arito noticed that the ruler was too strong. He has energy absorption, a curse, decay, temple construction, resistance to light, and self-healing. The owner of the fort has many rare skills, but most importantly, he is the source of this black mist. Sarah saw Arito, was surprised, and asked how he got there. The traveler was glad to have arrived on time. He noticed exhausted people. Dark replied that these people were cursed by the expansion. Arito noted that they were most likely members of Melena's team. Instead, Dark introduced herself as a simple traveler. The traveler thought that Dark was too frivolous for Ciara's team. Now is not the time for dating. But Qualis became interested in the darkness. The owner noticed that the demon god's armor had turned into a demon, and therefore the darkness had problems. Under the influence of the owner and due to prolonged accumulation of magical elements, an independent entity emerged. It turns out that this is, so to speak, the remains of a demonic god, but even in this form he remains an S-rank threat. Sierra is currently busy healing, so Qualis believes that Arito is the best option. The boy swallowed his saliva in horror. The traveler was scared. The shop owner told Arito not to be so afraid. If this were a real demon, the boy would be completely powerless against him. But now is not the time for talks. Qualis noticed that the main threat to the remains of the demon god was Rito. The traveler was scared when the demon began to approach him. If the demon attacks Arito, he must do something. But the sword is not yet improved, and the boy does not have the strength to hold it with one hand, so he needs to act quickly. The demon lunged at the adventurer, knocked him down, and now the armor is gradually decreasing. The demon uses the skill Disillusion. It's pointless, because when the armor falls to 0, it will melt and Rito will die. The traveler urgently needs to come up with something. The armor can no longer be strengthened. The sword flew somewhere. He needs to decide what to do with the demon's skill. This armor was worn by the demon Belial. They say whoever wears it will be cursed. The armor has a deformation curse, dark protection, increased physical strength, and the ability to change size. If Arito replaces all slots with skills with a holy attribute, the curse will disappear. The adventurer almost died. He thought about the reinforcement slot. Qualis believes in Arito. It seemed the adventurer understood what the girl meant earlier. The boy calmed down. He still had time because it is the same mechanism as when strengthening the sword. The traveler can do it, so he tries to concentrate. He wants to open the improvement slot, choose the attribute and the amount he will pay. Only the right choice remains. Arito decided to put everything he could. At that moment, the monster made terrible sounds. It seemed the boy won. Kvales confirmed this. Arito is in shock. Dark prays for the boy and notes that he must be tired. Sarah is glad about the traveler's victory. Koala praises Dorito. The boy is grateful to the girls, especially Koala, for the useful advice. Arito sneezed. The girls were worried because it was cold here, and they did not have spare clothes with them. The shop owner noticed that they could not go out looking like that. The cursed armor of Veliel wore out. It was supposed to automatically adjust to the body. At first, Arito frees slots for upgrades and strengthens the wind attribute to make it lighter. Maybe the guy will come to terms with his bad traits because the cursed armor now gives more physical strength, protection from darkness and lightness. Arito put on the armor. He felt disgusted. It seems these armors adjust the body to themselves, although usually it is the other way around. Over time, the boy gets used to this discomfort. But he completely forgot about that pile of monsters. Kvales wondered when everything would finally subside. Arito noticed that there was no peace in sight. Darkness rushed into battle. Incredible! There are quite a lot of monsters here. Darkass asks the guys for help, and the shop owner believes that the traveler can now support well if he wisely uses this magical curse. For Arito, this request is difficult, but he can do nothing, so he throws himself into battle to help Dark. Suddenly, the exhausted girl woke up on the floor and asked if there was anyone here. Sira told the awakened girl that she had nothing to fear because the one in armor was not a monster but its conqueror. But the girl did not believe it because even 3 rank A adventurers were powerless. It is hard to believe, but the dark fog has already dissipated, and the girl who woke up noticed it. When she woke up and decided to rest, a rumor was already going around the city that the group had captured the monster's lair and rescued the missing adventurers. They say that the team included Dark, who was a great swordswoman, Sira, who was a priestess, and an unknown black knight. Liel prepared delicious food for the guys. Arito likes how she looks. He is sure that Sierra will also be glad. The sister thinks that exploring the dungeon is interesting. The brother told her he would tell everything later. The brother and sister greeted the guests. Dark greeted them and apologized for disturbing them. Sira also apologized, and Qualis appreciated the appetizing appearance of the treat. The guys started eating and talking among themselves. Dark valued Lyle's cooking skills. Qualis refuses to talk about Rito's legs, and Dark thinks that some things are better left unsaid, but the guy wants to get a reward for the victory. The exploration took a long time, and Dark paid Arito his share of 7 million yen. That's a significant cashback. All of Girika's deals are recorded in history. The traveler apologized for the inconvenience. Sira told Arito not to worry. Qualis is grateful to the traveler for the shop. Dark is also grateful. The guy believes that all the girls he knows deserve his trust. In fact, Arito has something he wants to tell Lily, Qualis, Sira, and Dark, and decided to honestly tell them about his abilities. The guy told the girls everything, and they were very happy. Koala asked if his story was a secret, because telling it could help the cause. The boy replied that it would cause problems, because he wanted to become a traveler. Lil and Dark were delighted, and Sira and Koala were shocked. Sira asked why then he raised the item enhancement skill to level S, and the boy replied that his base stats were low, so he created the strongest equipment that suited him. Suddenly Sierra, dark and emotionless, began whispering behind Rito and Lila, making them feel anxious. Then the girls turned around and expressed joy, praising Arito. The boy thanked his acquaintances. The traveler promised to do his best. Now even a dragon could kill. The girls celebrated his departure, and the craftsman's life was going smoothly for him. He probably shouldn't quit this business. It was already morning. Yesterday the guys were noisy until late. It seemed Lilo was again in bed next to Arito. Qualis was nearby. Sarah sternly asked Qualis what she was doing there. Lyle told her brother that it was already morning. Lily said breakfast was ready. Sierra and Qualis began arguing about the situation. The morning was too noisy. Dark said good morning. Yesterday she had a lot of fun. Arito was surprised that Dark was here too. Everyone gathered and sat down to breakfast. Everyone liked the food. It was tasty. They began to hurry, Lila, because it was already late. Laya was already about to leave. The guys wished her a good day. Dark noticed that Arito's sister was doing well in preparatory school and said that without Laya it would be difficult for them. The guys began talking to the boy about him becoming an adventurer. He agrees that he created a magic sword that barely reaches risk level B. The guy decides to save money, but stronger weapons cost much more. Qualis noted that strengthening and selling weapons is unprofitable. Dark warned that without increasing Arito's stats, he would not be able to use strong weapons, and Sira added that combat skills are needed. Because of this, the boy decided to improve and sell materials collected in battles. The items that drop are inexpensive, and by killing demons, you can increase stats and save SP. The girls like his idea. Darku was surprised by Arito's attentiveness. Koala appreciated his idea, and Sierra offered to help the traveler, and Arito noted that they were all good. Leela suddenly called her brother and said that she forgot the sheet with the assignment on the table. She asked Arito to bring her the assignment during lunch. The boy noticed that it would be bad if he did not bring his sister the sheet with the assignment, so he had to give it to her, and the girls were curious about what Arito was doing with Gillica. The traveler explained that he improved Gillica and now it can call. He also improved the chaos map and added a messaging function. The guy replied that messages are less noticeable than calls, so it's more convenient to communicate. You can write to people you have added as friends. Girls really like these features. Dark noted that it was very useful and convenient. Sierra emphasized that Arito's special ability would soon manifest, and the shop owner added that the boy has a talent for creating new items. Kvalis suggested to the traveler to try a few more such items, and the boy thought that the new product could be sold exclusively. Dark asks to make an improved ghillie for her. Syra and Kvalis also wanted an improved map, so the three girls gave their cards for the reader update. The boy doesn't care, but there is a condition. The adventurer sat down to improve the gillics of his familiars, but something went wrong. The boy decided to bring Lilo the documents, remembering her task. There were toys on the table. The traveler is looking for his sister's paper and finds a sheet with questions about things for adventures. He understands why his sister visited Quales, although it was his duty. Arito thought he could be relied upon, but he was significantly inferior to others in knowledge and status. Yet the boy did not give up and was ready to work hard. Finally, the traveler began to cause chaos in everything, and was able to strengthen things. The girls he knew supported him and rejoiced at Arito's success. The girls began to check the functions of calls and messages. The boy hopes they will figure out the maps. Arito arrived on time at the Riot Preparatory School, where his sister studies, and it is hard to believe that under the control of the Adventurers Guild, students with good recommendations pass without exams. A man at the school noticed that Lilo's abilities are among the best. Admission rules are easy to change, so it is necessary to prepare well for the entrance exams. The sister runs to meet her brother, who is proud of her. That sister apologized for disturbing him, to which the brother replied that there was nothing to worry about. Lila asked why Arito was worried, and he asked who the girl next to her was. Lily told the girl that the traveler would not harm her. The stranger introduced herself as Katerina. Arito responded by introducing himself and asked if Katerina was his sister's friend. Lulu herself replied that Katerina was her friend but very shy. The boy cannot imagine how the girls get along with each other, although both are shy. The brother gave the sister a paper with a task. Suddenly a stranger appeared, asked what the students were doing here with some person, and said she would call security. Lily addressed the stranger by the name Erica and said that this was her brother. Erica looked suspiciously at the boy and asked if he was human, while the girl, unfamiliar to Arito, pounced on him with questions, believing that he had ordered Lilo to call him older brother. The boy said he didn't care what they said because they were brother and sister. Arito noticed that Erica was nervous. Lilo explained that her older brother had brought her what she had forgotten. Erica ordered the traveler to leave immediately and asked the students to return because they had another practical lesson after lunch. Erica scolded Katerina, reminded her of the elf's dignity, and warned that she had brought trouble upon herself and was getting what she deserved, so she needed to think carefully. Therefore, Katerina might not reach the intermediate level, so she should think carefully. The girl cries and apologizes to Erica. The sensible girl continued to shout at Katerina because she started crying. Erica asks the crying girl to be mentally stronger next time. The angry girl runs away. Arito asks if Katerina is okay. The younger sister asked if Erica was a princess. Katerina was her childhood friend, although she had a different status. Erica did not claim the throne because of her brother and sister, so she became an adventurer to succeed on her own. Katerina said she studied with Erica at this preparatory school, and added that the angry girl often worries about her. Arito doubted that the angry girl said this out of concern for Katerina. Then Leal's brother asked the sister's friend why she could not reach the intermediate level. During practical training, you have to fight with the instructor. If during the fight your life points drop below a certain level, you fail the exam. In Katerina's case, it is harder to do, so she is unnecessary. Students are allowed to restore health, but Lilo's friend cannot use magic because she is not agile enough and finds it hard to retreat, so Arito understood that restorative medicine must be taken. Brother Lilo gave the sister's friend an exclusive potion to help Katerina reach an intermediate level. The girl took the potion. Rito returned home, having finished his business. Lilu returned home. Her brother met her sister and asked how her day went. Lila thanked her brother. Katerina said she received a satisfactory grade for the first time thanks to the advice and items from Lilo's brother. The sister said it was amazing, and Katerina did it with one hammer strike. Sister Orito was surprised that her friend understood everything so quickly, because she herself would not have managed, and it turned out that Leo's brother used memories from a previous life about the hammer to help his sister's friend. Katarina had never used such an item before, and the traveler wanted to test on someone a new automatic restorative potion that activates when HP falls to 50% and independently restores health. Thanks to the victory, the girl Orito will be able to better understand what the new potion is for. Leo thanked her brother and noted that Katarina and the restorative potion passed the test. Leo's friend cried. Tavern was congratulated on success in preparatory school. Even Erica praised her, albeit reluctantly. Orito sat in the Regnum tool shop where potions were sold. He yawned and dozed off. The man in the apron apologized for the wait and said the test was completed. The potion worked. Orito was truly a master of his craft. The man asked the boy to bring any quantity of the tested product, because now it was the best product in the store. Orito thought he earned a lot, and the store and customers were satisfied with the new product. The seller thanked the boy for his help and paid for the adventurer's services. Suddenly, a card fell from Orito's hands. The boy apologized for his inattention. The man in the shop noticed that the traveler was too zealous. The worker wondered if it was too hard for the young man. Orito looked sleepy and replied that everything was fine. He was having fun and was paid directly. Then the employee asked the boy to slow down because sales were slow, and the traveler promised to try, not knowing how many he could make. Orito realized that there would be too many goods. The man in the shop said it was not worth tormenting oneself. The worker was glad that the traveler helped Katarina because she turned out to be his daughter. The boy asked how his daughter was feeling. The man noted that it was all thanks to L.A. with the big sword. They trained for a long time. The employee thanked Orito for introducing him to his younger sister. The traveler said that Katarina always had potential, and the man noted that she was his daughter, and if Haritu did anything to Katarina, he would not get away with it, because the girl's father would deal with the offender. The boy thought that he was sleepy and felt dizzy. He decided to check his condition. It turned out that he was just overtired. Unlike a debuff, it cannot be cured by either medicine or magic. Orito wants to do something about it. Overwork can cause another illness, but the adventurer does not want to die from it, although he has already knocked down the dragon 3 times and almost died, and under normal circumstances this would simply be impossible. The boy had a lot of errands today. Orito went into the store and thanked Sierra, his son, who met him while working in the sales department. There were no buyers. Sarah noticed that the traveler looked pale. Orito said he had overworked himself, not even realizing it. The boy's body was heavy. He was afraid to die again. Orito does not want to die. Suddenly he sees a dragon with a bag who wishes him good morning. The boy was surprised. The dragon asked the traveler if he was not tired, saying that even if it was important, it was not worth overexerting himself. Another dragon was frightened when Orito suddenly fell. The boy was confused and did not understand whether it was a dream or a fever. The dragons asked Orito if his stomach hurt, if he felt dizzy, and if there was anything to drink for fatigue. The boy felt déjà vu because there were 3 of them. It seems the traveler overworked himself a lot. If the hallucinations are incurable, maybe it really is easier for him to die. The dragons calmed the boy and promised to take care of him. Suddenly, Orito saw one dragon trying to feed him, saying that he needed to eat well. The boy replied that he was fine. The food looked quite appetizing. Orito liked its taste. Koala said that it was not due to overexertion, but simply fatigue. The boy replied that she might be right. It was as if everything had changed. Strange that everything was so simple. If Orito was overworked, he would need a few days to recover. Sierra and Leal entered and apologized to Orito and Qualis for the interference. The boys had a confrontation because of Orito and Qualis, whom they accidentally saw together.